Okay, so
Okay.
here we go. All right, we're going to start now. Hi, everybody, it's Janice Weber, and today I am bringing you an interview on astrology as a creative business. Our guest is Laurel Kassor, and she's here to go over a whole bunch of information for you. So, welcome, Laurel.
Hi, Janice. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here and share a little bit of my creative process with you.
That's great. And one of the things I like the best is uh, these interviews. They can happen with people all over the place. So, Laurel, why don't you share where you're coming from today?
I am in Raleigh, North Carolina.
So, there you go. I have traveled all the way to North Carolina to do this. No, I'm at home. Laurel's at home. And due to the internet, we can do this at the same time. So, tune in. Here we go. So, could you give me a bit of, or give everybody a little bit of a background of, because you've left your past career to pursue astrology, and I'm not sure when you fell in love with astrology, so maybe you could take us through that moment when you realized it was your true path and what sparked that decision.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. My passion with astrology goes back to the moment that I really discovered that there was more to it than sun sign astrology. I'll never forget. I had met someone who would end up becoming very important to me, but it was the first day I'd ever met that person. And they said, "Oh, you like astrology?" Because I told them I was an Aries. I said, "Oh, you like astrology? Well, what's your moon sign?" And I was like, "What the heck's a moon sign?" They said, "You go home, look it up, let me know. You'll love it." And boy, howdy, were they correct about that. I ended up finding out my moon was an Aquarius, and it started to answer questions I didn't even know how to formulate fully into words that I had always just kind of felt inside of myself. It gave me access to new dimensions of self-awareness. And I just absolutely fell in love. And I knew from that moment, literally from the moment that I was like, oh, there's more going on here. I always kind of thought there was all these patterns everywhere. I always saw them. That was when I was like, man, this is my dream job. That if I could do this all day, if I could just like sit around and unpack the human experience all day long, that's all I want to do. And so that happened when I was about 20. I was about to turn 21. But prior to that, I had gone to college to be a high school English teacher because I quote you, I wanted to teach the human experience. That was what I wanted to do. I thought, I remember reading an Aldous Huxley quote in high school, if you read 100 books, you live 100 lifetimes. And I just loved storytelling and exploring the different dimensions of different human experiences through storytelling. And so I was like, well, let me go into English then, I guess. I hadn't really been turned on to psychology at that point in time. Um, well, fast forward a little bit, I ended up dropping out of college in my senior year, recognizing that I would not thrive, my creativity, my unique mind would not thrive in the strict boundaries of the public education system. So I left that, and just that was when I found astrology, was in that gap. Fell in love with astrology, wanted to do it, didn't seem feasible. I had a lot of limiting beliefs around like no one believes in it. People will think I'm crazy or I'm silly or foolish or whatever. How would I ever be able to support myself despite my deep passion for it? And so I ended up fighting an uphill battle for about a decade, working jobs that did not feel aligned with me. I ended up going back to school, getting a degree in public relations with a minor in English, applied to, oh my gosh, every PR job you could imagine, and never found a position in the field. So during that time, I was in the service industry. I was waiting tables, I was bartending, and I ended up doing that for quite a long time, for about 10 years on and off. Did a stint in corporate America working customer service at a financial investment firm. That was soul sucking. That was not a good place for my
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
spirit to thrive. And then fast forward a little bit more, after about 10 years of very devoted study and passion and just continuous honing of the skill, eventually I found myself at a crossroads where another relationship had fallen apart. I was burnt out. I was miserable. I had to kind of reckon with the fact that I was living for everybody else but myself. Nothing I was doing was making me happy or fulfilling me except astrology, except my study, my passion. So eventually I had to just kind of take a risk on myself. I was like, girl, this is your dream job, right? Well, it's now or never. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life. Like, you're good at it. That took a long time too. A lot of boundaries or self-imposed boundaries around, are you good enough to do this? Like, am I being serviceable to the study? Do I know enough to like create respect amongst those who would turn to astrology? That's really important to me. And so eventually I sent a little prayer out to the universe. I said, oh, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know how to run a business. I know astrology, and I've gotten very good at navigating experiences with people and giving advice and insight and different perspectives, because most of the work I did as a bartender was not just making cocktails. It was
No,
talking to people, it
no.
was listening to their stories, it was connecting with them, it was giving them insight and different ways to view things. And with my astrological background, I would take those insights and present them in ways that were digestible to people, where I didn't talk about astrology, but instead it was like, oh, I'm hearing these themes go on in their life. Well, maybe it would be helpful if I pointed this out in a way they can engage with. So I was like low key using astrology without letting anyone know that's what I was doing. Eventually I was like, okay, I got to do this. Let's go. So I sent out my little prayer
What
about
was
3 days.
that last spark that made you go, because you'd been doing 10 years now,
The
and you
last spark
went
was that
finally,
moment where I realized that it was like was doing everything for everyone else, that I wasn't fulfilled, that my burnout was totally self-inflicted, my failed relationships were totally self-inflicted, being caught in this loop of never quite being enough to get out of this job that was always considered like less than. People have stigmas around people who work in service industry, and so it was just kind of this like it was almost like there wasn't a choice. It was then or regret it for the rest of my life. So I just had to say, we got to try. We have to give it a real go. Like, we need to just we have all this passion, we have all this drive, we have all this energy. It was all being misplaced previously. I mean, I wrote a lot of poetry, but like, oh man, I had so much to give, and it didn't have a good home to exist in. And so that was the moment where I was like, oh, I gotta create a safe space to do this, to encourage myself to dive deeper into the passion. And that was when I found or sent out that little note to the universe, help me, send some help and guidance. And I found the Energetic Alignment Academy, who
mhm.
was like, you don't know business, but you got a gift to offer. We'll help you build it. And I was like, that's exactly what the hell I need. Signed up with them. And then we'll be celebrating my third business birthday in about a month or so.
Oh, that's very neat. Yeah. So congratulations on that. Now I
Thank you.
know you've gone through a few changes, because from our previous discussions, you've said that astrology is often seen as a science and an art, but you brought your own creative spin to it to make it your own unique approach. So, do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually a very, very, this interview is so timely, Janice, because I'm so deep in the throes of creation myself right now with my business. Um, Given the intent I had set for it, as I just outlined, like, I need a safe space to go put all this passion and all this drive and all this momentum that I have. It's given me such what's a good word for it? It's given me a really nice little kingdom to get comfortable in, to let my creative juices flow. And so part of what brought me to astrology was this immediate intuitive recognition that this shit could be immediately practical. This stuff can help us right now in real time. And a lot of astrology is really based in prediction. And I do love prediction, don't get me wrong. I do. I've spent a lot of time in that area of astrology. But as my study developed, as my client work really kicked off, and I was able to engage with people as they were engaging their own lives with this insight, it started to reveal some interesting nuances that kind of extended beyond prediction. A lot of people's gripes with astrology is that, like, it predicts fate, or it has this attachment to a definitive outcome, and that everything's like written in stone. And I've just come more and more to witness through my practice that that is not how it works. It is really this, what I've come to call the cosmic guidance system of consciousness. I've come to see, and kind of now am in the throes of creating a system of engaging astrology and kind of shifting the lens and the filter that we look at it through, as not this like kind of smattering of random meanings and symbols that foretell exactly how you're going to experience your life, if you'll get the job, or if you're going to be broke, or if your husband's going to leave you, or whatever. It's not what it does. It doesn't depict with certainty those things, but instead it tells us a lot about the where we're at in our own process of evolving our own awareness. And what we see in the charts is this feedback loop of content, experiential content, the people in our lives, the places, the things, the events, the situations, and the internal processing of what do those things mean to us? Well, what do they bring up into our awareness? What processes are they calling upon for us to engage and enact in our lives? And when we start to recognize that astrology helps us to kind of map out, okay, this person's coming up to you and having this kind of conflict. And in the chart, we can see maybe Mars is doing something in your chart, and we can get to the bottom of, like, okay, that conflict, what does it mean? Well, we know Mars calls upon us to stand up for ourselves, to assert ourselves in some way, to enact, to take action. And so when you get presented with conflict like that, it gives you this moment. It's just a little moment in space time where you get to be like, conflict is here. What do I know about how I address conflict? How am I going to show up to this one here? What am I really standing up for? Sometimes it happens very fast in real time, and sometimes it happens in reflection. But when we start to explore astrology from a new framework of the practical aspects of it, and looking at it not as this definitive fate system, but rather almost a way to kind of calibrate, where are we at in our awareness? Where are we at in our consciousness? And what are the different themes that we're currently working with? And where have we seen those patterns before? That's where it gets really magical, because these patterns, they play out again and again, but in different ways over time. And each new rendition of the pattern is a new opportunity for you to hone in, to refine a little bit more, to listen to the cosmic guidance system within yourself and be like, here again, am I? Well, where did I miss the turn last time?
Okay. Because years ago, because I did a astrology course in my 20s, she said it was more like a blueprint of your life and what can happen. So nothing's fixed, but it gives you
Correct.
this overview of what can happen. And some of it I found absolutely fascinating at how
Mhm.
totally in sync with what was going on. And other parts I'd be like, yeah, that's not quite where I'm at. But again, it's this blueprint. So a blueprint, as you know, with anything, it gives you just a guide, but a guide
Mhm.
isn't fixed in stone.
Exactly. And people call it a blueprint so often. It's very common in astrology to call it a blueprint. I'm very pro blueprint. I think now I've gone a little bit deeper with it in my practice. I look at it more as an equation than a blueprint. They're pretty similar things, right? But the equation gives us this kind of it invites us into the experience rather than just being like the house that is being constructed, if you will, with the blueprint, with the idea of it being more of a an ongoing equation, an unfolding equation that we're kind of constantly in a process of solving XYZ. They're all our consciousness, they're all our awareness, how we're developing, how we're responding to different situations around us. It invites us back into that process and reminds us that like we have the agency in our life experience. Mars might signify argument. If Mars is showing up in your life in some way, it might signify an argument, but that is almost like a prompt. It's part of the variables in solving the equation. Okay, so we got the variable for argument up in here. Now, how are we going to solve that? Are we going to scream back at them? Are we going to punch them in the face? Are we going to give in to their demands? Are we going to run away? Or like, what are we going to do? Are we going to calmly take a beat, take a breath, and then try to talk it out with them? How will we respond? What will our choice be? What astrology can help us do is recognize what are the options available to us. A lot of the times we sit in our default positioning. The blueprint is just being built as it's built without our conscious input. But when we start to use astrology in a way where we can get really creative with the process, really invite our conscious co-creative force to make some decisions. How do you want to experience your patterns? They're going to unfold. That's part of, in my opinion, why we're here on Earth. We got some lessons. The birth chart helps us to understand. I know what a good way to think of it is too. When you sign up for a class, you get the title of the class, they give you a syllabus, but they don't in the syllabus tell you what all of the assignments are going to be exactly, right? Like they don't give you all the details. They don't give you all the readings right away. They kind of tell you like this week we're going to talk about that. This week we'll talk about this week we'll talk about that. Well, if you want to pass, hypothetically pass the class, if you want to learn the lessons of the class, well, you show up, you do the work, you do the readings, you do the assignments, and then you get to be like, wow, I really like gained a lot. I really did a lot. I can now like go out and venture forth with that knowledge. But if you don't show up, if you don't do the work, if you just kind of coast by and bare minimum it, then you're not going to feel like you get as much. You might have to repeat the class, right? So astrology kind of you as the student of your own life in this metaphor, you determine so much of how that outcome of the assignment will be. We don't always get to choose the assignments we're given, right? Like that's just part of it, like things happen. But when the pattern plays out again, it will show up differently based on, am I getting all the memos here? Did I catch the lesson? Did I do the homework? Did I turn it in? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I don't know who said the quote, but lessons are repeated until learned. So
Mm-hmm.
that's all part of it.
It absolutely is. I like to say that like the cosmic GPS, the cosmic guidance system will keep telling you to get off again and again. Like if you miss that exit, it's gonna let you know. But the further you go on down the road, the longer it's gonna take to get back to the initial spot, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. So I'm hoping for our viewers that that does as well. So you've talked a lot about some of your challenges. You mentioned that you had limiting beliefs that you needed to overcome. And what I'm wondering is, um, how has taking all that into consideration, but deciding that you're going to follow your passion, how does that change your life?
pretty drastically, pretty significantly. Um, there have definitely been a lot of challenges along the road. I definitely stand firmly by a lot of those limiting beliefs that have been big bumps and hurdles, but through it was like I kept missing go back to my analogy. It's like I kept missing the exits again and again until it was slapping me in the face and it felt like, okay, either we get off or we don't or we die. Basically, or we just crash and burn here in the wreckage of our life. And so the starting wasn't really so difficult because there wasn't an option. But the belief that I was worth people's time, people's money, that I had something really valuable to say it was such a powerful moment when I started to recognize those things and that my business was actually creating a vehicle for my personal growth and my personal evolution because I was finding it really difficult to self promote. I know I'm good at what I do. I've worked very hard to be good at what I do, but I had a lot of patterns in my life of people not listening to me when I felt like I had important things to say, or when I had insight that was valuable or could really maybe help change a perspective on something. And so I had, spent a lifetime fighting for a platform to share about the things that I loved, like with anyone who would listen, if they would, and being shunned and ridiculed and dismissed and called not smart for my beliefs in astrology when I know full and well that like you honestly gotta be a little bit cunning to be able to hold all these different variables in your mind at once,
Mhm.
right? And so learning how to give myself space to embrace the fears was so important, and little by little getting the internal validation of recognizing within me that like, okay, that was a good reading, that was a good piece of advice, that was a good newsletter I wrote, that was a good whatever I did, workshop, right? I do a lot of workshops. And then kind of seeing the feedback come back to me as confirmation was really fun and exciting and new and enriching because I used to look for the feedback before I would look within to validate it. And so having this business going through some of these really important creative upgrades, and recognizing like, wow, the words I create when they come out of my mouth, the metaphors that I come up with, the ways of explaining things, it all just started to like, wow, I really did find my place. I just had to create it for myself. I had to carve it out. I didn't feel like I fit anywhere in the existing world. And so made a space for me to exist within. And that was really and remains so empowering and so enriching. And now I don't struggle with like a lot of those struggles as much. I mean, they're always still a little bit there, but I've learned how to really embrace my hard work and validate from within through the creation of my business, which has been just invaluable.
Well, you have come a long way, even in the time I've known you. So, lots of changes.
Oh, they
Now,
keep coming too. They won't stop.
no, they don't. Now, my last question is, what advice would you give to others who feel called to leave their current careers to pursue something more aligned with their true self?
I would say to do it. Obviously, that's the first words that are going to come out of my mouth, but obviously be smart about it. I can say that in hindsight because I wasn't all that smart about it. I kind of let myself get pushed to the brink. You don't have to. You don't have to go into the it's all or nothing territory to start taking small steps. That's actually a huge piece of what my work is with people. I mean, you can't, some people might be able to. I haven't hacked the system on how to immediately like mind hack someone into being a different person and having a different life. It's steps of awareness. And when you can just start taking one little tiny tweak at a time and start, it all starts with your thoughts, you know, for a decade. The thought that was predominant when it came to astrology was like, yep, this is what I'm made for, but I don't live in a world who wants me to make it doing it, you know, like it was this no one like the first thought was I know astrology is real, but also I know no one else does, right? Like it was this immediate like I would validate myself and immediately give myself a reason why no one else will, you know, and that kept me stuck in place. One of the biggest things I see with other professional astrologers when we all get to chatting is that we all agree we waited too long to start doing it professionally. I do think that that is a mark of a responsible astrologer because there is like a certain level of information you need to know to be confident, right? And so, but that is one of the common things. A lot of very gifted astrologers wait a very long time because they are concerned about being credible, about making sure the information's good and solid and as correctly represented as we can. And so that can hold us back and lead into imposter syndrome. But the thing is, if you know in your heart, like I knew the moment I met astrology, I was like, I love you. I think you're the love of my life. I want to be with you forever. If there's something in your life that's like that, then you'll find a way eventually. But why wait until 10 years from now? Why wait until 20 years from now? Why keep repeating the same thoughts that I'm sure come from a pattern in your life too?
Mm-hmm.
When these patterns are reoccurring again and again and populating in our physical reality again and again to give us opportunities to course correct. And so if you find yourself like sitting there with like, oh, that's so cool that she did it, but I can never start course correcting. Your guidance system's been going off, probably already telling you to like, let's start figuring this out. In the very least, just start brain dumping. You know, we got tools these days we didn't used to. You can do it.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that. I have to read out my mug, which is going to be part of all my interviews. I found this mug in 2018, so this sums it all up. It says, pretending to be a normal person day after day is exhausting. And it's a quote from Shakespeare, which is, this above all else, to thine own self be true. So,
Hmm.
what I've come to understand with what you've shared today, what I've experienced is you find finally a time where you will no longer pretend to be something that you're not. And people can either accept it or don't, but when you step into that, you end up having the life you always wanted to have.
Hmm. Absolutely. The
So,
invitations
congrats.
to evolve are always there. It's
And
almost like annoying. You're almost like, okay, with the character development, but when you start paying attention and just asking yourself, is this how I want to respond? Is this how I want to experience these exchanges? And what can I do? It might set you on a new trajectory to start experiencing the same energy, but in way more, if I may say, pleasurable ways.
so thank you for coming in today. So
Thank you for
again, this
having
is
me.
Laurel Kassor, and I'm not saying, I think I'm saying that right,
You
Laurel.
are saying it
Okay.
correctly. Laurel Kassor, that's
So I
right.
will drop in the description. Laurel will have her contact information for everybody in case you want to reach out and connect with her. And at this point, we're going to stop.